I'd like to introduce our first speaker tonight, Marcus Conyers. Marcus is the author of 20 books and articles on improving lives through practical applications of mind, brain, and wellness research. An international keynote speaker, Conyers has shared his work with more than 100,000 leaders and educators in 30 countries. Conyers, who serves as Director of Communications for the Center for Innovative Education and Prevention, is developer of the Brain Smart HealthWise program, which he has shared statewide in Texas and here in Winter Park, Florida a few years back. His master's dissertation, was on cardiovascular health promotion through social marketing. With his passion for enhancing brain performance through exercise, Marcus runs half marathons in the United States and rows in the Cambridge Town Bumps in England. I don't expect that he'll have any memory loss for quite a long time from now. Please welcome Marcus Conyers.
Well, thank you very much for that kind introduction, and thanks for such a great turnout tonight. I'm very excited about sharing this information with you. I've been passionate about how to keep the brain healthy for 40 years, and what I'll be sharing with you tonight are 7 ideas that I hope you could literally take home and begin to use right away. Does that sound like a good way for us to proceed? Okay, amen, brother. Fabulous. So the first big idea I want to share with you, and this is based on the research from our new book, Positively Smarter, that just got launched on Kindle. It's to start to think about your body and brain as a system. So a big thing to think about is that everything that you do affects your brain, and your brain affects everything that you do. So if you start to get that as a big idea, so for example, when you sleep well, your brain can operate better. And when your brain operates better, you can make better choices in how you eat. So there's a real synergy of what we can do. So first big idea is lifelong learning. So give yourself a round of applause for doing the right thing tonight. Absolutely, what we know is that people who keep studying, who keep fully engaged in learning, literally keep creating new connections in their brain, which makes them smarter and stronger throughout the lifetime. Second big idea is aerobic exercise. I saw many of you walk here part of the way. Again, another great thing that you can do. One of the most fascinating areas of research is the impact of aerobic exercise on your brain. It literally allows you to have a brain that's much more powerful. For example, you can build new blood vessels to the brain. It increases certain brain chemicals that help you learn more. Also, another key factor that really the data has just come out is about strength training. Hands up anyone here in this room who does strength training. Very good. Well done for doing that. And for the others, what we're beginning to discover, it's absolutely essential for maintaining brain health. In fact, studies from researchers in Canada have found that strength training is one of the very best things that you can do for your brain. Also, healthy nutrition. We now know so much more about how nutrition affects the brain. Sleep, 7.5 to 8 hours a day. Again, what we're beginning to understand is that when your brain sleeps and goes offline, you're actually nourishing and recharging the brain. Another aspect that was modeled very well by Dr. Evans is a sense of humor and optimism. Hands up if you think optimism is important as you age. This is a group with great wisdom. And the other factor is positive connections. When we look at all of these factors, we can see that from the most recent research, and I'm drawing from the Institute of Medicine's work on cognitive aging, a brand new report that just came out in April, and research from the Harvard Medical School, that by adopting the right exercise, we can actually reduce stroke by about 70%, type 2 diabetes by about 90%, and heart disease by 80%, compared with average rates in the US. Hands up if you find that exciting. So what we're beginning to understand, that lifestyle changes can have a very significant impact on your health. So let's start off with a key thing. Please repeat after me. Keep neuroplasticity front of mind.
Keep neuroplasticity front of mind.
Again, a take-home message for you to have today is every time you learn something new, every time you do something different, you lay down the foundations for creating new connections in the brain. And every brain is unique as a fingerprint as a result of all the learning experiences that you've had. So how do we really get the brain to benefit from lifelong learning? So there's 4 keys. First of all, novelty. Taking on activities that are novel, that you haven't done before, that have the right amount of challenge, so it's just difficult enough that you have to push yourself. And then to have plenty of practice and get plenty of feedback. For example, my mother back in England, after I studied the brain for 20 years, she said, "Can you give me some advice?" And that was the first time my mother ever asked me advice, and the last time. So it was a big deal that I shared this advice: novelty, challenge, practice, and feedback. She's in her 80s. She took an art class, began to do art, within 2 years was at an international level. She was so excited about taking on this new novel challenge, and she said she sees the world so differently now. She could walk in that garden and see all the different colors. So there's so much we can do with novelty, challenge, practice, and feedback to keep the brain growing. What we also know about neuroplasticity is, as we age, our brains can get better. Do I hear a hallelujah? Praise the Lord. Now, it can get better in a couple of ways. Now, most of us experience some decline, but some things can get better. For example, we can become wiser. We can become wiser in our decision making. We can become even more expert in anything that we put our minds to. So wisdom and expertise actually can improve with age, and as can our sense of humor and our ability to manage our emotions. So there's a lot of things that we can do with our brains that connect to our potential at every age of life. One of the key messages I'd like you to share is that whenever you're learning or doing anything with your brain, get fully engaged in it. Because the more engaged your brain gets in it, the more you're likely to create these new connections. And your brain has a very swift motivation system. When your brain thinks you're excited and engaged in something, it'll give you much more focus and you'll get much better results. So I want to get right into exercise in the brain. And one of the most fascinating studies, it was done with 1.2 million Swedes. And they found out that those kids who as teenagers had the highest level of cardiovascular fitness, 30 or 40 years later had the lowest levels of dementia. So what we now know is that starting generations into exercise early on and keeping them doing it is one of the best ways we can prevent dementia later on. Some key goodies we get from exercise is brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF, which people describe as the miracle growth of your brain. So this is where you get the great synergy. So say you do a bit of exercise and then you go and learn something. It's like your brain is flourishing and ready to adapt to the new learning process. And even walking, say 30 minutes, 5 times a week, can stimulate production of this wonderful brain chemical. So the way I always think about exercise now is it's largely for the brain. It's about keeping the brain fueled and fabulous. This is a picture of me, having finished my half marathon, modeling the use of endorphins. I was so happy. So this runner's high is very real, and you don't have to run a half marathon to do it, but doing regular exercise can flood your brain with these positive brain chemicals. Some of the changes that happen in the brain as a result of exercise, you get more oxygen in blood to the brain, you have more neurotransmitters, and a really key thing to do, and this is why I'm very excited to be back with the Winter Park Health Foundation, is laying down these good habits in youth can make a huge difference for the body and the brain system. And just to give you one example of how exercise can boost academic performance, is that in Naperville, Illinois, struggling students in the 8th grade who exercised before English read about half a year ahead of those who did not. So even in something as concrete as reading, and the same in math. So this is why I've been passionate to get exercise back into schools. Because not only does it improve health, it improves their performance, and ask any teacher, it also improves behavior. So we're talking about the body-brain system here. And now I'm a new convert to strength training. I've always done it, but I did it really just because it felt good. but what we now know, it's absolutely key for keeping your brain healthy as you age. So I'm a research junkie, but there's one study I found from Canada. There was a group of women with mild cognitive impairment who had a bunch of different exercise protocols. The aerobic didn't really help, but those who had strength training had significant reversal of their cognitive decline. And these results, and it's an early study, but it really swamped other things that we could do to improve the brain's performance. Favorite story about strength training, because I have some people more in my age group and a little bit older, is there used to be this belief that after you reached a certain age, your body couldn't produce new muscle cells anymore. So it's okay to do weight training, up till your 30s and 40s. But did a fantastic study at Tufts, where they went in and they worked with people in their 70s, 80s, and 90s. And these folks were a little bit scared to begin with, but they did weight training for 8 to 12 weeks. Some of them doubled their strength, some of them tripled their strength. So they had dramatic changes, because what we now know is that new muscle can be formed at any age. And one of my favorite parts of this chap was interviewed. He was 93 at the time. He said, I feel like I'm 50 again. I've got this positive attitude back. And one of the funny anecdotes was these people started to get so strong they were outlifting the graduate helpers they had with them. So I really want to keep this really front of mind about adding strength training to your protocols as a very powerful way to improve your brain performance. Just want to do a little bit about nutrition, because we'll have more on it later on. The resource I really like is the Harvard School of Public Health Healthy Eating Plate. So you can go up and reference that yourself. I like the Harvard studies because it's based on long-term studies about what really is likely to have an impact. So just a few key things there. Lots of fruits and vegetables, and the more colorful the better. Please say it after me, a palm of protein. So imagine a plate with a palm of protein on it, the rest of it with fruits and vegetables and some grains. And you've got some pretty simple approaches for really improving your nutrition. Now, one way to have a little bit of fun with this is, I have not found much evidence, and maybe I'll be corrected by some dietary experts, that there's a lot of benefit to additional sugar in the food supply. But sugar went up from about 2 pounds 200 years ago to 123 pounds in 1970. In 2014, almost 152 pounds of sugar. So if you just add that amount of sugar into the food supply, no good can really come of it. So what I would say is, if you want to find ways to moderate your diet, kind of be aware of the sugar, because we really don't need so much of it, and fill it with those other things we've spoken about. Now, when I'm teaching this to high school students or graduates, I like to use comparisons. Use your brain to make your brain better. So here's a couple of comparisons. So take a can of soda. Has about 10 teaspoons of sugar in it. So when you look at a can of soda, please say soda. Soda. 10 spoons.
10 spoons.
So once you start to think in these kind of concrete ways, you're more likely to take an action. So that's about 150 calories. So how far would you have to walk or run to burn that off? About a mile and a half. Now, when I'm working with students or adults or anyone, my goal is to get them thinking about their brain health. So otherwise, you can have mineral water, 0 sugar, 0 calories, and if you're lazy, you don't have to walk at all. But I want you to start to connect all of these different things to see there's a synergy. Now, anybody here ever eat pizza? Okay. Not quite as enthusiastic and honest as putting your hands up when it came to pizza. But here's some quick comparisons. Veggie slices, 550 calories, total fat, 14 grams, and saturated fat, 6 grams. There's some evidence to indicate we might want to cut back on saturated fats. But just look at a different pizza, all meats. How many calories? Just shout out your guesses. See how smart you are? You're getting smarter already. Fat, And then saturated fat, 27 grams. So the big picture here, just going back to that Harvard Healthy Plate chart, I want to give you some examples about how it applies in your real life. So here's my favorite one. 6-inch turkey sub, 260 calories, 5 grams of fat, 1 gram of saturated fat. So you can see that it's quite easy to make some good choices. So 2.6 miles, that's not bad. Now here's another thing that I used to eat before I started doing research for our current book. Cheese fries with ranch dressings. Can anybody guess the number of calories? 3,000 calories. And this is kind of like an appetizer. So by the way, your brain will remember this stuff next time you go out and eat. 217 grams of fat, 91 grams of saturated fat, and this is a long way to run to work off an appetizer. So, the reason I like to share those examples is to to help encourage you to train your brain to read labels and to plan the sort of nutrition you have that's going to be more brain healthy for you. I want to touch on practical optimism. I was so delighted to be in a room full of optimists, but because optimists would think it's worthwhile coming here tonight, wouldn't they? The problem is all those pessimists that stay at home and don't learn these messages. But seriously, a lot of the research in our new book, Positively Smarter, is finding tremendous benefits from optimism and happiness. We know that optimists and people who are happier tend to live longer. And one of the reasons maybe they're more likely to stick to positive health routines. They also suffer less stress. And the point I want to make here that's really key is, growing up we used to think that happiness is out there. I'll be happy when I get this job, or I marry the right person. Happiness was out there. The new research really shows that about 40% of happiness is up to us. What we do with our brain day in and day out. For example, before I came in here to walk, I just to do the presentation, I had to walk around by the flowers, and I thought, I so appreciate being healthy enough to be here. I was so grateful to have the opportunity to come and speak, and I couldn't keep the smile off my face. So take opportunities to increase your levels of happiness. There's a whole body of science around that, and happiness is good for your brain. And in fact, what I love about the way the science is going is we're now considering happiness as a learnable set of skills that we can get better at day in and day out. Another point I want to share with you is about the power of positive connections. In every study that I've seen, when they've used medications and compared it to what happens when people have a lot of social connections, we see that social connections are so good for your brain. So I always encourage people, take more time to hang out with friends and family and to dialogue, because talking is a lot of hard work for your brain. You have to listen, you have to pay attention to the other people. So think of your socializing as being good for your brain. In fact, our brains were developed for us to be good at socializing. So use that great skill set. So again, to think about the idea that brain influences everything, and that everything influences the brain. So day in, day out, you have the power to make your brain better. So just to recap on these strategies, lifelong learning, to keep learning new things, aerobic exercise, strength training, healthy nutrition, sleep for 7.5 to 8 hours, practical optimism, to be in a more positive state, and making positive connections can give you 7 strategies that you can take home and apply tonight to make your brain, body system better. Thank you very much, everybody.
Has her BS degree in food science and nutrition and is currently working on her master's in nutrition and functional medicine. She's a board-certified oncology dietitian at Florida Hospital at Celebration Health. In partnership with the Head and Neck Surgery Center, Mosser conducts pre-surgery assessments and educational visits, manages inpatient nutrition, and conducts outpatient nutrition follow-up. She counsels other oncology and wellness patients in outpatient settings and provides lecture on nutrition and brain health. Please welcome Courtney Mosser.
Okay, ready? Okay. Well, first of all, I loved what he said about how simple nutrition can be. You know, we tend to get caught up sometimes in all the fads and the little nitty-gritty, but at the core, good balanced nutrition is going to reduce our risk for all chronic diseases. So, when all else fails and you forget what I said, just remember, good nutrition, balance is the key. What's good for one area of nutrition is going to be good, or one area of a disease is going to be good for all of them. When we try to work on heart health, or reducing our risk for cancer, or gut health, all of these are also brain healthy diets. So basically a balanced anti-inflammatory diet. And balanced means all food groups. So many people come to me and they say, oh, I try not to eat any fat, or I'm on a no carb at all diet, or we've cut something out. We want all of the food groups. Fat is very important, especially for brain health. Carbs definitely have their place. Fiber is important. There's vitamins and minerals in them. Not in fiber, but in carbs. So all food groups are important. And I will touch on the specific nutrients that you do need for brain health, but that's not as important as the whole picture. So first, with inflammation. Again, all chronic diseases have an inflammatory component. So if we can reduce inflammation in our body, we'll reduce our risk for all chronic diseases. Whether it be something like a heart disease or cancer, diabetes, Alzheimer's, dementia, osteoporosis, any chronic disease. The pro-inflammatory foods to avoid are the ones that we hear over and over and over again. You know, the things like the pizza, saturated fats, trans fats, sugars, red meats, processed meats, refined starches, donuts. The foods that you always hear that you want to avoid, those are the same ones. And when I give talks about each disease state, I repeat myself a lot, because it's always going to be the same. The anti-inflammatory foods. And one thing I want to point out is look at how much longer this list is. There's so many more foods on the anti-inflammatory list. So when people tell me, oh, you took away all my favorite foods, there's so many more foods that you can have. Fruits and vegetables. There was a study done on 8,000 people. I think it was observational, but 8,000 was a big number, that showed that those that had 7+ fruits and vegetables a day had a reduced risk of dementia of 30%. And that was a couple years ago, so I'm sure there's different studies now, but I always thought that was a pretty important number. Legumes and whole grains. Legumes are going to be our beans, nuts, seeds, and they all have their place, again. Teas, primarily black and green. The polyphenols have been proven to be beneficial for brain health, along with reducing risk for cancer. And then our healthy fats. I will definitely be talking more about this because fats are so key to brain health, especially the omega-3s. So good sources for omega-3s, flax seeds, chia seeds, nuts, especially walnuts, and then our fatty fish, like salmon, tuna, sardines, anchovies, herring, and try some new ones. I always thought I hated sardines. I thought that was something I would never try, and then I tried it one day and I love them. So be open to trying these different foods. Red wine or grape juice is anti-inflammatory primarily because of the resveratrol. So you can also take a resveratrol supplement, but it's nice to get things in the food source. And for the red wine, it's 1 cup, 1 serving for women, 2 servings for men, and a serving is about 6 ounces. So just keep that in mind. And then also you want to focus on a variety of spices. We tend to do a lot of salt and pepper. There's so much benefit to the different spices. I mentioned ginger and curry. The spice in curry is really turmeric. And turmeric is beneficial for, again, everything. It's extremely anti-inflammatory. It's been proven to help reduce some of the plaque in your brain. It helps with cancer to stop some of the blood vessels from growing so the tumors don't grow as quickly. It's an extremely beneficial spice or herb. Ginger has numerous benefits as well. But really, just go to a spice store. There's one right here. And play around with all the different spices because they all have some benefits. And another thing about that that's interesting is some of the components of spices are unique to spices. You know, we can get some of these vitamins and minerals in this fruit and also this vegetable, but some of the ones that are found in spices are not found in other things. So you miss out on it. I'm bringing up the Mediterranean diet not because I think that everyone needs to focus on a specific diet, but so often people just want, where should I look for recipes, or what should be my guide? And the Mediterranean diet at its core is an anti-inflammatory diet. So this is a great, if you want to just type in recipes for Mediterranean diet, these will be anti-inflammatory. Because as you see, it's some of the stuff I've talked about. Plant-based foods at its core, healthy fats, it's full of the fish and the olives and the avocados, whole grains, herbs and spices, and so for that reason, it's beneficial for all chronic diseases. Okay, so I'm very excited about this slide because it looked very similar to the previous presenter's slide, so yay, great minds, but definitely I just wanted to go over these that you want to exercise your mind, and he discussed numerous examples of why. Exercise your body because we want to get that oxygen to our brain. Get your sleep. Now, slight calorie restriction. So the way they've explained this is basically thinking about being 80% full. Or, I've heard it explained like a trash bag. If you fill the trash bag to the top and then you try to tie it off, you can't close it. You want to be able to be about 80% full so you can still close that trash bag. Okay? And they've done interviews with so many different people who've lived to 102, 104, and I always read those because I want to know what their secrets are. Or when I have patients that are older, I always ask them what their secrets are. And I've never seen one where they didn't mention something to the extent of, I never eat till I'm full. I always eat regular meals throughout the day. Nutrition is always a component in those interviews. So a slight calorie restriction, but on the other hand, you want to eat regularly. So I always recommend eating every 3 to 4 hours. This helps you not fill the trash bag all the way full. Because if you're starving, you don't have that control. You just want to eat. If you eat breakfast, 3 to 4 hours later, have a little bit of a snack, lunch, snack, dinner. You're more in control over what you eat, how much you eat. And also, giving your body those little nutrients at a time, it helps regulate your blood sugar. You actually absorb the nutrients better. Because your body can't handle can't handle more than about 30 grams of protein at once. So when people have these big steaks, and of all the protein I got, they only absorb about however much percentage of that is protein. The rest is just kind of being wasted. So if you want to get the most out of your food, you want to divide it into these separate little meals. And then staying well hydrated, and then specific nutrients, which we will now go into. So, the antioxidants and phytochemicals. Phytochemicals are found in all plant sources, not just the fruits and vegetables, but any plant has the phytochemicals. Teas, herbs, spices, it's in all of them. We discussed why fruits and vegetables are so important. That benefit that I said with the fruits and vegetables has not been seen with just supplements. So it is important that you eat the whole food first. Supplements have a place if you're not quite meeting your needs. Sometimes we need a little extra help, like maybe omega-3s, but it's always good to try to get it from food first. Okay, some specific vitamins. Vitamin E has been shown with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's to reduce the risk. Sources of vitamin E: wheat germ, whole grains, green leafies, nuts, seeds, egg yolks, and certain plant oils. Another benefit of egg yolks is choline. So again, some of these, you eat one food and you're going to get, or one nutrient, and you're going to get so many benefits from it. Because choline's been proven to help with brain health as well. Also, vitamin E in partnership with vitamin C has a stronger benefit. So vitamin C is not just oranges, strawberries are also a good source of it, bell peppers are a good source, even the dark green leafies have some vitamin C. Vitamin A, which is found in eggs, shrimp, fish, fortified milk and cheese, is another benefit. So many people tell me that there's no way that they could possibly get 5 to 7 fruits and vegetables in a day, but it's really all about planning. Everything about nutrition really comes down to planning. So I kind of worked it out for you, just so you could see. If you have 1 or 2 servings of fruit with breakfast, you know, maybe with your cereal or oatmeal, you cut fruit or vegetables on it, maybe you have on the side an orange, then you have one for a snack. Then for lunch, maybe you have a salad, or maybe you have a piece of meat and some broccoli. And then you have for snack later on, you have some carrots with some hummus maybe, I don't know. And then maybe with dinner, you have another little snack, or another little side, another salad, and then for dessert, you have a fruit. So it's really just about thinking about it. If you think about it, it's very easy to get in, but so often we're going, we're moving, and the day's over, and we haven't drank our water, we haven't had our fruits and vegetables, and we've just mostly just eaten the things we've grabbed. So we're missing a lot of these nutrients. The American diet as a whole, while we are calorie rich, we're actually malnourished because we're not getting the vitamins and minerals and essential nutrients that we need. Also, variety. Like I mentioned, there's different phytochemicals have different benefits. You want to eat like from the rainbow. So the idea is that there's the blueberries have different phytochemicals than the strawberries. The boldness of the fruits and vegetables kind of give you a hint as to how much phytochemicals are in there. So with that, I like to say, think of iceberg versus kale. There's a lot more in kale. And if you're eating across the rainbow, you're going to be getting these different phytochemicals. Okay. Whole grains, like I said, they do have a benefit. I don't want anyone cutting out their carbs. They're important to a certain extent, just which carbs, not the white breads, but you do need your whole grains. So they're a good source of vitamins and minerals. They're a good source of vitamins, the B vitamins, the A, E, and C that I just mentioned. Again, these are antioxidants, so they're going to prevent damage from free radicals in all systems of our body, but also our brain. And then they're also a good source of magnesium and iron. And among other things, magnesium helps with anxiety. So while it's not necessarily helping, I mean, it does help with other sources of brain, but in addition to remembering, cognition, it's also helping with anxiety. So if you can reduce your anxiety, then you can normally remember things a little bit easier because you can focus. Also, good source of fiber, whether that comes from beans or whole grains or fruits and vegetables. Fiber is going to slow your digestion down, and it's going to help you stabilize your blood sugar. This allows you, instead of having that sugar and then crash, just slowly absorbing the sugar, and therefore your brain can use it over longer periods of time. The brain can't store energy the way that your body can, so we need to have slow increments. Okay, DHA. As he said, I'm studying right now to do my master's in functional medicine, and I just did a section on DHA, so I'm extra excited about this. But DHA is just one of the omega-3s. If you take an omega-3 pill, it probably has EPA and DHA. So most people are getting DHA, but it is very important that if you're not, that you do, whether from fatty fish, the walnuts, although plant sources of omega-3s will be converted to DHA. So if you want to be sure that you're getting that form, it's best to get it from either fatty fish or from they can make it from algae or from a pill. One of the very few times I'll say that about supplements. But again, I put on the bottom ALA, that is a form of omega-3. Your body will convert that, and that can be found in any of the plant sources. But one thing about DHA is they did a study, and it was a small amount. They gave 180 milligrams to people for 9 years, and there was a 47% reduction in dementia. And I was looking at different fish oil pills, and most of them have at least 180. I mean, that's not very much. So it is very important to get that nutrient. Okay. Curcumin, which is turmeric. Well, it's in turmeric. It's the phytochemical that's in turmeric. It's what makes it yellow. It slows the formation of plaque. Just checking my time. Okay. So, and in addition to that, it's anti-inflammatory and it reduces the risk for cancer. So, lots of benefits. In combination with vitamin D, a UCLA study showed that it would not only prevent or reduce the risk of plaque forming, but it could remove plaque that was already there. to a certain extent. So vitamin D, we make that vitamin D from sunlight. Most of us, though, aren't getting enough, so you can get it from fortified dairy, from fatty fish, from eggs, and from mushrooms. So anybody who's avoiding eggs are good for you. The egg cholesterol thing is a little bit outdated because, there's a little side note, but dietary cholesterol doesn't link to blood cholesterol the way we used to think it does. Some people are more sensitive, but not all of us. So a lot of my patients are still avoiding eggs, but there's so many benefits to eggs. Briefly, I'll just say that we need folic acid and B12 is important. In addition to just our brain health, it's been linked to depression, having not enough folic acid. So another side of brain health that we don't want to avoid if possible. Sources of folic acid in our food, it's in folate, and that would be beans, lentils, spinach, broccoli, fortified orange juice. They recommend you get 400 micrograms. So you can see that if you had a cup of chickpeas and a cup of spinach and you had a little cold salad, it'd be good. And B12 as well. Works kind of the same way, they kind of work together. Okay, then there's benefits to so many things, but I found this interesting. I found this about 5 years ago. They used to call blueberries brain berries because they're so good for your brain in so many different ways. I've just listed a few of them, but we have fiber, which I talked about how that slows the absorption. Fiber is beneficial. Vitamin C, vitamin E, we talked about vitamin E with Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. Folic acid, general brain health plus depression. Potassium. The next line are all the phytochemicals in it, so it's not really important that you know which ones, just that it's full of phytochemicals. It helps reduce short-term memory loss and Alzheimer's. It's anti-inflammatory. They say that a half a cup of blueberries a day would be enough to get the benefits, and it's blueberry season, so you can go pick some blueberries while they're in season. Although, another side note, if they're not in season, you should buy them frozen, because when they're frozen at the peak of their freshness. Blueberries, we should only be buying blueberries fresh when they're in season, because if they're not in season, then we're shipping it from someplace else. They're not really fresh, so we want to buy them frozen when they're not in season. And, like most things in nutrition, the benefit is the synergistic effect of things together. So blueberries are more effective with fats. A lot of nutrients actually are more beneficial with fats. So maybe blueberries and walnuts and like a kind of healthy dessert would be your way of getting that in. So I think I'm right on time. But my final words of wisdom, my take home is first to keep it simple. If you just focus on balance, variety, and anti-inflammatory foods, that's going to take care of a lot of the issues. But to have specifics, hydration is important for everybody. The solution to pollution is dilution. Okay, so all the different cleanses are fine, but we need to make sure that we're drinking water because our body was made to detox. So we want to help our body do what it's made to do. Works better when it does that. We want to focus on the quality, not the quantity. So having quality foods about 5 times a day, small amounts, 80% full. We want to make sure we can tie that garbage bag off. Antioxidants, anti-inflammatory foods. So again, the main ones for those are going to be our healthy fats, our teas, spices, fruits and vegetables. Okay? Make good nutrition a regular part of your life. So many people come away when I give talks or if I have a consult and that's too much, I don't know what to do. And basically you just change one thing, improve in one area, and as long as you're improving, you're going in the right direction, that's really all that you can do. And a year later, you should be at a completely new spot. So don't try to do everything and then just go back to where you were. Do one thing until it sticks, another thing until it sticks, and continue in that direction. And this is my favorite quote. I really think it sums everything that you need to know up. Eat food, not too much, mostly plants. Okay, so Cheetos are not food.
Beverly Angel has nearly 30 years in the field of aging, guiding organizations through the visualization, creation, and implementation of community programs that promote health and well-being for elders and their caregivers. Beverly has an MS in gerontology, as well as an MA in Jewish communal service, and a BA from Douglas College of Rutgers University. She's held positions in academia, hospital, and community-based arenas, and has received private foundation funding to facilitate projects in aging. Angel has designed and implemented innovative training and educational programs in geriatrics, developed and managed an adult day health center, and served the Alzheimer's Association in Central and North Florida as their program coordinator. In this position, she worked with the diagnosed and their families and was responsible for community education efforts relative to Alzheimer's. Angel's most recent initiative involved the promotion of brain-healthy lifestyles in Central Florida. She was also a contributing author to the book Broken Fragments, Jewish Experiences of Alzheimer's Disease Through Diagnosis, Adaptation, and Moving On. Please welcome Beverly Angel.
Okay, so the advantage of being the third speaker is that everyone else has said a lot of what you're going to say. So I'm going to change it up a little bit and try to move on in the direction of looking at mental challenges, but I also wanted to just let you know that when I speak today, you're going to see how much of what we know about brain health is the same. We've talked from the first speaker to the second to myself, and we're going to see that there are certain themes that run through this topic, and so you're going to get it a few times. So the first thing is, today we're going to focus really on revving up your mental engines. We want to talk about how we can make our brains better, faster, smarter. And the initiative that I had been involved in previously was called Brain Up through funding with the Winter Park Health Foundation. And we had a couple of mottos about brain health that you've heard about in the past. And the first was hang out, that great brains love great company. Social engagement is so important for us. We need to be with other people. It's going to help us get through those lonely days. It helps with our language skills. It helps with our thinking. The more we're with other people, even people who are different than ourselves, it challenges us in new and novel ways. We want to eat right. I'm not going to focus as much on that. And working out, flexing those muscles, pumping up your heart rate strengthens your brain, as well as we just heard weightlifting. Chilling out, that has to do with lowering our stress level. That has not been spoken about as much today. We know that high levels of stress actually kill neurons in the brain. And so there are lots of ways to reduce our stress, to talk about emotional regulation of our, using our brains to emotionally regulate ourselves. And hopefully we'll get a little bit more of a chance to talk about that today. We also want you to find purpose in life. We talked about that a little earlier. I think that engaging in a meaningful life, waking up every morning, having a goal for yourself, and knowing what you want to get out of your life is very, very important. But now we're really going to turn to the topic that I want to stress, and that is challenging yourself. A happy brain is a hard-working brain. We want to stress out your brains a little bit, just like you stress out the muscles after you work out. We want you to think about things in new ways, and we want to make thinking a little bit difficult sometimes, or a little bit challenging. So when we talk about, I need to get to my right thing. So when we talk about maintaining our brains or improving our brain function, we're often just referring to our memory. And so we had our hands raised before. How many of us can never remember someone's name that we should, or we walk into a room and we can't find what we went in there for? Familiar experience for all of us. And of course, as we get older, you may have done this when you were a lot younger and you didn't think about it, but now that you're in your 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, it's really bothersome, right? Because now we're worrying what's going on. But for most of us, we're actually able to trace back our steps, or go through the alphabet and remind ourselves of a name, or do something that brings that reminder up. And I just want to say, people with Alzheimer's disease don't have that capacity because they have short-term memory loss. So if you're doing that, you're in a better place. But the point is that memory is only one part of what the brain does. And what I want to talk to you about is how many different powers we have with our brain. So the first thing we need to do is recognize, what does the brain do for us? So I'm not going to go over all of this, but this is some of the brain functions that we have every day that we use. So you're looking at perception, memory, language, and auditory skills, visual and spatial processing, motor movements. And then as you move to your right on the slide, you'll see executive functioning, which really looks at other skills which are higher level functioning skills. And so when you look at, for example, flexibility, this will help you deal with uncertain situations. And we know we can't predict things from day to day with how our lives are going to turn out. Or focused attention is another skill of your executive functioning, the frontal part of your brain. And this is what helps you avoid distraction and have that targeted focus. We like to think about people being able to do a lot of things at once, but the truth is a lot of times we do a lot of things at once because we don't have that targeted, focused attention. And so it's a lot harder to do that than to, I mean, honestly, if you looked at my desk, I'm always doing 100 things at once, and I would be a lot more productive if I focus on one thing at a time. Emotional regulation, I mentioned that before. Again, this allows us to manage stressful situations. How do we respond to something? Do we respond to it with angst and anxiety and worry and sleepless nights? Or do we respond to it in a rational, thoughtful way, and we've toned our body down and figured out how to relax our minds, whether it's through biofeedback or meditation or anything like that. So we want to utilize some of these other methodologies for reducing stress. And then, of course, working memory is the ability to hold information in your mind while you actually manipulate that information and in real time. So I'm just going to give you an example of this. This will be the first little exercise that we do. I'm going to give you a 10-digit phone number, and I don't want you to write it down. I know you all have pens and pencils, and I want you to memorize it with me. So I'm going to say it once, and then we'll repeat it together 2 times. Okay? 407-783-1550. Ready? 407-783-1550. Again, 407-783-1550. Now you have that number in your mind. Now, can anyone repeat it backwards to me? In your brain, if you were to learn geometry, for example, and you have a theorem and you have to remember that theorem in order to go on to the next one, so you're holding information. To have a strong brain, you really have to cross-train through all these different activities that our brain becomes involved in and that I have up on the slide here. And one of the ways to do this is to participate in different, solving different puzzles or brain teasers or doing different things that are going to test your brain. And so I want to give you an example of this very quickly. So right here you have an image on the slide, and I want you to look at this image, and there's no tricks to this slide. The front of the bus is the same as the back of the bus. If you see any difference, it's just a difference in the computer drawing. But what I want you to do is tell me which way the bus is traveling. Is it going to the left or to the right?
Left, left.
Okay, who said right? And why is it going to the right? Okay, it has nothing to do with where it is on there. Yeah. And why is it to the left? That's exactly right. So, what I want to tell you, now the reason why this is an interesting puzzle, I think, is because while you're considering your answer, this puzzle illustrates a good concept to remember that when you start to think that your memory is terrible. Because some of you are going to be able to answer this puzzle like this woman did, because you can compare this image to all the school bus images you've ever had or experiences with a school bus, right? And only the ones going left would match. Why? Because you're walking up to the bus from the back side. There's no door on the front. To get to the door, you have to walk around to the other side of the bus. So from this side, coming to the bus from this side, the door is on your left. So at this side, looking at the bus, you know the bus is going to go to the left direction. Now, if you ask someone in kindergarten this question, they wouldn't have a problem answering this. And why? Because preschool children will say right away, you can't see the door. And this is information that school children have all the time. They're coming out of school, they're going and heading towards the bus. This is information that's fresh in their mind. I can't tell you the last time I was on a school bus, going every day back and forth to school. So we rely on our memory. We have to rely on our memory because most of us don't take the bus on a daily basis. And if our memories were perfect, we'd all come up with this great example. But the truth is, imagine having a photographic memory, or think about having to remember everything that you've done every day in your life from the day you've been born. Your mind would be overloaded with information. So what happens is your mind lets go, or prunes back, or we forget things that we're not using anymore. So why is this information important to us? We want to be able to filter through all the data that we need, but our mind basically pays attention to the things that are deemed important to us. So think for a moment about all those memories that you have that are emotionally laden memories, like the day you got married, for example, or the day you got your first car. That's always a big one for guys and men, right? But whether it's a good memory or a bad memory, it's laden with emotion, and that makes our memory rich with context. Like at our wedding day, we may remember what our bridesmaids wore, what our mother wore. You have that colorful memory. So the point of this bus image is to tell you that if you want to remember more, you need to do things that are more meaningful to you, or more importantly, you need to find a way to ascribe a rich context of meaning to whatever you're trying to remember. So if it's somebody's name, for example, and I was just telling someone this earlier, I met a woman named Sigrid this week, and I was having a hard time remembering her name. And then I looked at her and I thought, I have to remember this woman's name. And she was wearing a very colorful floral dress. And I thought, okay, there's a designer who's no longer designing, but she used to design really colorful clothing, and her name was Sigrid Olsen. Well, I can't tell you the name of this person, the last name of this person, but I will remember now that her name is Sigrid Olsen, even if the next time she's wearing a dull gray dress like I am today, because I've made that affiliation with her. Also, there were some packets that you were handed out at the beginning, and if they weren't handed out, maybe Stephanie can hand them out now. Does someone have the packet of puzzles? So anyway, there's a packet, and I'm going to go through some of these puzzles, and I don't want you to think that I'm not giving you the answers. I'm going to give you the packet of material to take home with you so you can do a lot of this when you go home, but also most of this information will be in the packets, and she's going to hand it out to everyone. You don't need to put up your hands. So the next thing is, if we want to do new and novel things, like we talked about in Dr. Conyers' lecture, we need to challenge our brain with new and novel things. So what's a good way to do this? A good way is to rev our mental engines and come up with employing challenge, novelty, and variety to our lives. Think about how you can enrich your environment every day. And one way to do this is to challenge your brain with new activities. So the next 10 images, and I literally have 10 slides, and we're going to go through them really fast, is these are a range of hobbies. Have you ever had kids and they said to you, "Oh, Mom, I'm so bored," and you want to shake your kids and say to them, boredom is a state of mind, because there really are a million things for us to do, and sometimes what we need to do is stretch our own abilities and do these things, do the things that are new to us, that are unfamiliar to us. So just looking at some of these pages, I'm going to just skim through them and you can see them in your handout. You can make art from scavenged materials. You can learn to brew beer. Doesn't that sound like fun? You can do creative writing, join a creative writing class. This is one of my favorite ones. Become an Etch-a-Sketch master. You know, everyone can sit down and draw, but learning to do it on an Etch-a-Sketch, you know, things always mess up. You don't have a lot of opportunity to fix it. Change up what you do every day. Fencing, genealogy, learning to hula hoop, great aerobic activity, by the way. For myself, I've taken up, since my kids have left, quilting. I've learned to do basic quilting, and I'm now at a point where I'm starting to learn how to make my own patterns for quilting. And that involves a lot of mathematics, which I'm not very good at, and so that challenges me. And believe me, I go back to Joann's a million times a week for new material that I've cut in the wrong way or did something wrong with. So there are lots of hobbies, and you can have these lists to give to your kids, your grandchildren, for yourself. But you can see everything from wood burning, watercolor, weightlifting. So we talked a little bit about neuroplasticity before, and I want to talk about it again. Neuroplasticity basically means that the brain has the capacity to change throughout the lifetime, throughout our lives, and rewire itself in response to our experiences and in response to the stimulation of learning. And so every experience we have alters our brains. Do you think that if you juggled for 7 days in a row that would alter your brain? It would, because it would make a new neural pathway for you. There was a London taxi cab study. I'll tell you about it very, very quickly. It was between taxi cab drivers in London and bus drivers. The taxi cab drivers had to go through a whole sort of course to learn the thousands of places to drive in the city. The bus drivers, of course, had the same chartered course day in and day out. When they looked at the posterior hippocampi in these two different populations, they found that the taxi cab drivers' brains actually, that part of their brain actually was bigger in the taxi cab drivers than it was in the bus drivers. And also in this study, they found that the longer someone drove a taxi, the larger his or her hippocampus became. And so what's happening is they were making more connections in the area of their brain that had to do with visual spatial location. And so that's, so if we don't want to be stagnant like the bus drivers, then we need to look at, how do we get neuroplastic changes in our brain? What do we need to be doing? So again, this is a little bit repetitive, but we need to engage in new and novel activities. You know, we get used to having these mundane, routine activities that we do, and our brain doesn't have to work as hard to do those things. We want to surround ourselves with variety. We know, for example, that rats that are in an environment with spinning wheels and all sorts of different toys and things are much smarter and actually can grow neurons in their brain more than rats that are just in a cage with, or mice I should say, just in a cage with water and food. So we want our environment to be really interactive and active and changing. We also want to challenge ourselves with, I thought you were talking to me. The one thing I want to say about surrounding ourselves with a variety is we want to get out of our comfort zone because, as I said, when routines are established and followed, neurons don't work as hard. And so if you're not great at math, take an algebra class. If you have a book club that just reads literary fiction, when you go home, try to read science journals or read mystery novels or something that's going to give you a twist on what you're used to doing. Also, you want to challenge yourself with increased difficulty. So how many of you do Sudoku, which is a great thing? But each time you do it, you need to increase the difficulty that you do. And one way to increase the difficulty is actually to compete against a clock, against time. So that if you know you're able to complete things in 15 or 20 minutes, now start trying to complete them in 10 or 15 minutes. Always competing against the clock is really great for things like that. So another way to increase the difficulty is to set goals for advancing to the next step, just like I did with quilt making. At first I had to learn how to quilt straight lines. Then I had to learn how to quilt moving the quilt on my machine, which, let me tell you, really takes a lot of eye-hand coordination and is not as easy as it looks. Then you start looking at how you create patterns. Whatever you do, you want to push yourself to the next point. So I finished that. You also want to be, as we said before, a lifelong learner. And what I want to say about this in recognition with Alzheimer's disease is, I don't know if we've heard studies that say that, more highly educated people have less of a risk of Alzheimer's disease, and we've seen those studies kind of come and go, but I think what we're really seeing is that when you are a lifelong learner, not necessarily your higher level of education, but when you're a lifelong learner, what we're seeing with the disease is it's compressed. Someone who doesn't have as many neurons in their brain and as many connections, and they fall apart, we start to see the symptoms of diseases like that earlier, and they last longer. For someone who has a lot of connections in their brain, and maybe these two connections have dropped off, but now they can go to a different file box in their brain and find that information in a different way, whether it's a word or a thought or whatever it is, we see that they can do that for longer periods of time, so they're staving off the symptoms of the disease and compressing the disease to a shorter period of time. So that is one philosophy about lifelong learning and education. The other thing is, when we talk about, you also need to set time aside to train your brain. And I think this is very important. So for example, we were talking about meditation as learning to do meditation or other kinds of relaxing techniques, whether it's yoga or whatever you do. But meditation is something that you have to teach yourself. And so we know that when you want to teach yourself something, you can actually do that in short time frames and with limited time investment. And what I have read, in a couple of studies, is that 10, 20, 30, or 40 hours over a 2 to 3 month period can actually make a difference. So kind of what we're saying is that practice makes perfect, right? So your mothers were right when they said a long, long time ago, try, and try again, right? You want to create, you want to do new things, and you want to be successful at them. So that brings me to my next slide, which is we don't want to give up, and we don't want to have a fear of failure. Fearing failure is really what stops us in our tracks. We don't want to fail. And what we really should do is relish failure, because if the goal is to be exposed to novel things and to increase levels of challenge, well, then it's not going to be easy, right? It's going to be hard, and you're going to have to try to do it over and over again. And people who are not afraid to fail often succeed because they keep at whatever they're doing until they get it right. I know that you've heard probably people say, oh, yes, I'm so successful in business now, but you should have seen all the businesses I failed at, right? Because each business failure led them to future successes because they learned from failures. And so that's the whole mother try again thing. But also, I just want to give you a thought. I sometimes have a problem with the school system, not every school, but a lot of schools, because we create a success or failure situation in a lot of schools. We tell kids, okay, we're going to give you a Spanish test, and they fail it, they pass it, or they fail it. But if they fail it, there's not a methodology usually in the class to go back and relearn it and to try it again and become successful. We're just moving forward, and those people who are not successful are now left back there. When we think about our brains and how different people learn differently, we really need to be coordinating so that people can learn potentially at their own rates or try again. My child's not here, so I'll talk about it, but I had a child who had a lot of struggles in school. And I'll tell you, I graduated high school 4 times, myself, and then 3 more times. But, I would get very frustrated because here was a child who would work very, very hard at trying to learn. But every corner he turned, he just was getting frustrated, so he would give up instead of moving on. And so I think we need to look at the whole idea of failure. Okay, losing my breath here. So now I want to just move into some of the puzzles, and you're going to have all these puzzles. What I suggest is that what I've done is I've had groups, brain groups, I don't know, whatever you want to call them, and oftentimes they would do these puzzles together. But what we suggested often was come together in a group and do the puzzles alone for 30 minutes or an hour, see what you can do. And then afterwards, work with someone else. So my strength is probably more in English and prose and not in math. So I would probably not, but maybe partner with my husband, who is a physics major in college. And so you can transfer information back and forth and learn from each other and kind of grow in this. So let's look at the next puzzle. We talk about failure, right? So this is a puzzle that exercises your frontal lobe, and it deals with working memory and attention. And basically what it's trying to do is teach you that you don't have to get the answer, you have to try. These are the kinds of puzzles that a lot of, that is used in the Army a lot of times to teach attention gaining skills. And I'm going to show you two different things that can be done with this puzzle. The first is that you go through the puzzle and to yourself you say the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7. And every time you get to the number 6, you count it. So you're going along, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 is 1, 7, 8, 9, 9, 7, 4, 6 is 2, 7, 4, 6 is 3, 5, 7, 8, 6 is 4. And you go through the thing and you count it and you come up with a number. On the back of your pages are all the answers to these puzzles. Don't look at the answers now. Look at it after you've tried for a while. So that's one way of doing it. Then another way, this would be more working memory. You go through, and now we're not asking you to just count the 6s, we're asking you to add 2 numbers. So we're asking you to count both the totals of 3s and 7s. I don't want you to go through and count the 3s and say, okay, there are 18 3s and 17 7s. What I want you to do is go through and add them. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7 is 10, 8, 8, 9, 9, and 7 is 17. And I'm not going to keep going because I know I'll make a mistake, but that's how you would do that. And so again, I can guarantee you the first time you go through it, you're not going to get it right. Now this next puzzle is also an example of paying attention and of language and visual connection. And what I want you to do is go through, and I want you to do this with me on the screen, read it, and then tell me how many F's you count. Do not say it out loud. Ready? Read it and tell me how many F's. Okay, only read it once. How many of you came up with 3 F's? Raise those hands high. Okay. How many of you came up with 6 F's? Okay, much fewer. The answer is 6. I can tell you I didn't get this the first time I did it. So why is it 6? Well, we know finished file scientific have the letter F. F. It sounds like F. There also is the word of in there 3 times. O-F. Why does that not sound? Why did we not get that the first time? Because the F sounds like a V in our heads. And so when we're just going through and listening for the sound of the F, we're only going to come up with 3. Am I getting to the end? Okay. Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. So that's an example. We talked about nonsense and being silly. So I want you to think about the riddles, amusing things, listening to Jon Stewart and Saturday Night Live. All of those things make you think differently, and basically what it does is humor and silliness takes you to have a certain expectation. It brings you to a certain point, and then it brings you to a new reality, and you have to think differently. And that's why humor and things like that work. Homographs are in there. I want you to remember that no brain is stronger than its weakest think. So there are a number of puzzles in here that look at some things. This triangular puzzle helps you look for patterns. The next one in there also looks for patterns, but here you see numbers. I'm giving you a hint now, so you automatically think this has to do with mathematics. It has nothing to do with mathematics. If you can let's just do this one really quickly. Read from right to left with me, but instead of reading the words, say the color. Ready, go. Green, red, black, blue, purple, red, black, red, yellow, yellow, green, blue, blue, red, green, purple, green. So this is the Stroop effect. And again, this is just an example of how our brains want to do one thing, and some of it has to do with attention. There are 3 different theories for the Stroop effect. But the one I want to tell you is that maybe recognizing color, excuse me, as opposed to reading, as opposed to reading a word requires more attention. And why is that? Because reading is habitual for us and recognizing color isn't. I'm going to skip to the last slide because you have a lot of this. These are some things that you can do for your brain. Learn a second language. Learn to play a musical instrument. We know areas of the brain in people who play music compared to non-musicians. That part of their brain is bigger, it's more developed. We want you to participate in new skill and hobby acquisition. Challenge your dominant side. If you're right-handed, brush your teeth with your left hand. Pour water into a jug with your left hand. Don't do it with your best crystal, but you can do it. Play board games, all sorts of games. Jigsaw puzzles are good for visual spatial connections. And the other thing, and I think this was said before, stay current with the research. It changes. It's hard for us regular people to get access to that sometimes. I do have some resources for you, and I also have some books and things that I can tell you about during our panel. Thank you.